This video today is a discussion on a very, very hot and uncertain subject as far as I'm concerned, because people do not use rational judgments in their decisions actually that affect the rest of your life. And I'm referring to what the caption says on this video, that homosexuality is not something that everybody has to accept, because it might be an individual person's choice to live that way. But now you've got the next equation in this total puzzle of how to figure and how to rationalize somebody wanting to be something that they weren't born to be. And I'm referring to sex changes. We're not talking about transvestites who choose to wear certain clothes. It's because a sex change operation is something you cannot undo once you've done it. So, you know, you have to really make your decision based on what you think is right. But also you have to think about how are people going to react to you afterwards too. I mean, people are going to say ostracizing somebody because of how they want to look or how they want to be as far as their gender is no one else's business except their own. And then they turn around in the same sentence and say, well, they chose this decision, so you have to accept that. See, and I have to disagree in that regard, because number one, if you have the right to choose what you want to do in life, then the other person has as much right to say the opposite. No, I don't agree with that. And that's what's supposed to be called freedom. Freedom of choice, freedom of expression. And I think when gays were in their closets, you didn't have as much friction in society as you do now, because people didn't know they existed back in the 80s. And then if they did, it was like, at least I don't have to look at somebody like that on the street. So if you don't want to offend people, or if you don't care if you offend people, then you shouldn't retaliate and say, well, you're wrong because this is the way I wish to be. Because you're forcing somebody else to accept what you are doing, and they don't agree with that. And that's everybody's choice. That's everybody's right to say, whatever lifestyle you choose, it doesn't mean that I have to accept that because you think that it's right, you know? And I have been hearing on the news about Bruce Jenner, who was a very famous athlete, and now he's chosen to be a woman. And I want to go a little step further about this subject and go to a series of shows or stories that NBC is currently doing on transgender. And this is children from 3 and 4 years old and up who had chosen to live as the opposite gender that they were born to be. And there's a U.S. senator who actually is advocating transgender attitudes. And that implies that the government of the United States is actually endorsing transgender attitudes, or if not, transgender life. And that's quite a step to take for the government to endorse something that is not in the Constitution, that a human being has the right to choose whatever kind of gender they are. It has always been a transgender is something where a person is born one way and they have an accident and they end up having to change genders because of that accident. That has always been, in a historical context, the reason why somebody's born a girl, they somehow or another have a physical accident where they have to restructure their genitals, and then they end up becoming a male or a man. And the same is true of boys. Usually boys do not have sex change operations unless something happens where they have to because of an accident. You know, usually during circumcision things happen like that. And now I think transgender subjects they're really being shoved in our faces because of one reason. Gays are in an uproar all over the country about their lifestyle must be accepted, it must be allowed. And this attitude is being siphoned into very, very young children. And that is why these stories are being aired on NBC, because the network wants to say to young children that, you may not feel comfortable wanting to be somebody else, but now it's okay because everybody else feels the same way. And it really still has to do with the parent seeing this from an objective viewpoint, that your child may want to be somebody else, but when they get older, and if they have that sex change operation, they may feel like I made the biggest mistake in my life. And if you let them do this, the greatest tragedy of all would be if they commit suicide, because you know what? Once they change, they cannot go back. And homosexuality, I don't care what people say, it was not how God intended us to be. Somebody else higher up than you, a human being, shows who you would be. It is not nature that decided that. It was God, and He alone made that decision. And that is why when you're born, if you're a particular gender, that's how God wanted you to be. And when you change who you were meant to be, I promise you, you will not be happy or content, because you'll always know that this is not the person that you were born. And I guess the only uplifting thing that a gay or any person who wants to be a transgender would say to themselves is, but I feel good about doing this. You may feel good about it, maybe today, maybe next year, but can you really say with all honesty you would feel that way the rest of your life? And this is not something you can jump to a conclusion and say, yes, I will always feel this way, because it's not true. A lot of people have made mistakes. I'm going to refer to the fact of abortion. Women kill unborn babies every single day. Most say, I have no conscience, I have no regrets. But there's a lot of young girls who have abortions, and they've regretted it the rest of their lives. You know why? Because they realize they just killed somebody. And when you have abortion clinics obstructing that reality into the discussion about Planned Parenthood and so forth, it's something that afterwards that woman might feel like she just made the greatest sin ever, because they just murdered somebody. They just actually snuffed out a life. Now take that attitude of regret and you put it into the equation of a homosexual or a transgender. They will feel regret for the rest of their lives. Not so much they killed somebody, but that they killed themselves, because now they're not the same person they were born. And now they cannot change it to be what they were. I studied a individual case. The man is dead now. His name was David Bruce Reamer. He was born a boy, and somehow or another they botched the circumcision, and they had to restructure his his genitals, and he was raised as a girl. Now, he never knew he was a boy because he was too young. And when he got old enough that his parents told him, he said, I always had a gut feeling that I was somebody that I wasn't. And so he went through all the procedures to have himself made into a man again, as far as having the surgeries and the rest. But even at 2 and 3 years old, he said, I always knew that I was born a boy. So when you are somebody of any age, especially a young child, please think twice about what you're doing, because When you do this, you're going to live with it the rest of your life, whatever decision you make. And this sort of thing about transgender, in my opinion, it's a fad. You're going to be doing it for so long, and then it's going to just phase into obscurity. It's going to die. And whatever your decisions are now, it isn't something like a removable tattoo or one of these little iron-on things. You can't wash it off. Once you've done it, that's it. There is no going back. And I just feel like you're born a certain way. It was because he intended it, and you shouldn't alter it. You shouldn't change it, because he knows what's best for you and nobody else. And that's basically why I'm doing this video today, to say to people, you have to decide what you know was preordained before you even existed, and that's the fact that God created you a certain way. There are instances, again, where a child is born with both genders, and then it's up to the doctors to say, well, based on what we see of your anatomy inside, it would be better if you were to be this or be that. But not just because of the fact that you want to change your gender because of some, split-second decision, or the fact that maybe you like certain clothes or you like to play with certain toys. That does not imply that you should change your gender altogether because you like certain things. Boys can like girl things and still be a boy, and likewise, girls have always been tomboys anyway, most of them. And you know what? They still are who they are. And it is the only smart answer to give somebody, that if you choose to be somebody else, you really should think about, are you doing the right thing, first of all? And number two, if you do this, you have to accept that there is no going back after you do it. I mean, they can give you hormones, they can give you this, they can give you that. Now, you know what? That's another thing. Homosexuality. If somebody wants to be something else, why not go all the way, become a transgender, and then be physically the same type of person that you want to be? In other words, if you like women and you're a woman, then maybe you ought to switch and become a man, so that when people see you on the streets, they can say, well, that looks normal, And vice versa. If you're a guy and you like a guy, then become a woman, and then at least you'd come across that you're at least somewhat normal that way too. But not the idea that having intimacy or love for somebody who is absolutely the opposite sex of yourself. I mean, it's unnatural to think that that was ever the intention, because nobody thinks about this. In nature, there are certain types of animal life that are asexual, which means God intended them to reproduce without a mate. And if he intended for mankind to be like that, we would have been asexual too, right? He would have never said to humankind, y'all need to have somebody else